intermediate response make? Well, the intermediate response in a crisis is call 911. The intermediate response in a situation is have police that know they have responsibility in this zone. If there's a bus that pulls over, puts its emergency flashers on and says, I'm in distress, that police officer should be well understood to be aware to look for that, to jump on the bus when there's a bus in distress. Other interventions, whether they are periodic people jumping on a bus, whether they are people who are in the area assigned to that, whether we set up an app or something in which they're through the control center, those groups can be notified so they can be alerted and brought onto a bus, whether at certain times of day, if we're tracking that there's problems, that we have someone who may be a mixture of a security person and a crisis intervention person could be on that bus. No one is really, we looked a lot, I mean, no one's really got this developed well, but everyone realizes this is epidemic across North American cities right now, and people are struggling for that. So we would like to try and get all of this expertise in the cities, we do have a lot, and look at, so how do we solve this problem together? And so, well, there are 9 things here that are very crisp, clean, do it now. This is one where we're saying, we think the elements of the solution are there, let's bring people together and firm them up.
Okay, so it's not on-board security force, we're
No.
moving away from that. I wouldn't mind asking the unions, like why, because you've pushed for that for quite a long time, and definitely advocated the power to detain being a massive.
And I will say, I still think that there needs to be some kind of presence on the bus. But Mr. Murray, his plan, is to have at least the police in the area and actually have the ability to contact 911 and the proper services you need. We do have our inspectors, we do have the control center. They have, their main concern is the operation of the transit system. We still fully feel security and protection is a police matter, right? And with the emergency 911 lights that are on the bus, as soon as the bus driver or whatever presses that thing, all the signs on the buses will state 911 emergency, call police. And if there's a police presence in the area, they can see that and they can get on that bus, right? Or if they're notified right away, like when you press the control button, if it works and you contact somebody, right, it still goes to the control center who will dispatch an inspector to analyze the situation and other things. Like to take out the middle person there and literally have the resources right at our feet. And as I say, it's a step in the right direction. Hopefully we will see some kind of presence in the future. But as of now, I think it is a good first step. And and as I say, we're willing to work with the city, with the councillors, the mayor, to get what is needed for the system, and we need to gain it back.
And I think this comes from the union, because I think I've heard you say it before, so why do you think drivers are discouraged from calling 911?
Actually, it's a policy, okay? There is a policy in place saying that you are required to call the control system controllers, and then they will analyze on if it's deemed worthy enough to call the police or not, which is kind of bizarre. That's why when Mr. Murray came up with the idea of why not be able to actually contact them directly, I thought that's a fabulous idea.
And I don't get how that meshes, because I've been at the press conference where the drivers now can hit a button that signals to the outside world, pedestrians, whoever might be going by, call 911, emergency on bus. So if you can do that and ask other people to call, why can't, like, yet you're saying the drivers are still discouraged to make
call
their call
911
Would be suspended quite likely if they do.
Because, and as I say, it's policy to contact the control center, not to contact the police or anybody else.
And that doesn't have extensions for, say, someone has a knife or is committing violence. There's no exceptions to that.
No.
I was just in the driver's lounge, Joanne, talking to drivers, hearing the stories of their frustration. And some of them who have decided that at times that they called 911 and were penalized for it, suspended. So you have someone in life. To me, that's it. And here's the challenge. So how do we solve this problem quickly? Well, if a person is violent, and there's been issues of operators being knifed, if someone's on there with a knife or a weapon or a gun, that's a police issue. This isn't a public health nurse or a social worker or a crisis intervention. We're going to figure out a way to get police on the bus. Our police budget, as you know, is pushing the limits of financial sustainability, so we've got to get smarter. So one of the things we know can work is that we have two ways to get a police on a bus quickly. One is 911, and that just seems to be that, especially when the employer, when transit, when the city as the employer cannot even provide when the radio contact in significant enough parts of the city, and that when that button is pressed, the person who's getting the button pressed that. Now, and the other thing that's stupid is, that I think is absurd, is only 50 buses can the control center go streaming to see what's actually going on. So in 590 buses, when the bus driver presses that button, the options are extremely limited because we haven't rolled out the streaming service across the entire bus system, which is the other thing. The final thing is how those interventions work and how you determine when it's someone who may have a risk of violence or is being somewhat disruptive, maybe swearing, maybe making people intimidating, feeling uncomfortable, being very aggressive. There's a judgment call that someone has to make at that. But right now, there's no intermediary step. We don't have resources in the city that says, okay, at key bus stops, people are going to ride at certain hours who are going to be able to deal with difficult crisis situations on a bus, or dealing with that. And I'm talking the things short of violence, because once you get to violence, you're into policing. But to all the other things that create real disruptions on the buses and can be threatening situations, or when people are in crisis and need help, we don't have that response. And the city doesn't have the expertise right now. So what I'm saying is we have to start a process now, immediately, to engage with those people who do have that expertise. And we do have lots of people doing that work in the city, and create a team that can work on our buses and work on our bus stops. What that is exactly going to look like is going to involve conversations with the provinces and conversations with a number of groups who have expertise in crisis intervention. But I'm very committed that we will have that team to do what I would call those personal crisis and those intermediate areas short of violence. That's the hole we need to fill, and that's what we're going to start working on.
How do you make sure the police board okays the more beat cops?
Well, do you know, I'm proposing a complete restructuring of governance of the city, including looking at transit and all of these things, because it's very clear to me there's real problems between what is policy and what is management. And we as elected officials, when it comes to our transit system, should have the levers to develop the policies and to have control that we're accountable enough to provide sufficient levels of security.
So
I don't
lobby
think
the province to change.
Well, I'm
the
asking
act
for a
then?
mandate.
Because it says that council can't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want the laws changed. They're not working. The police board isn't working. When the premier is criticizing the police chief, when the president of the police union is criticizing the police chief, when the chair of the board is trying to assemble some sort of response, when there is no comment really out of the elected officials there who are actually ultimately accountable, it's clearly not working. But but there's issues between the unions, there's issues between management, there's issues between the board. What is the governance relationship and the authority of council? It's not like a one-off. I mean, this governance review that was basically changing the deck chairs, you know, on how the EPC configured, was not looking at what's the authority and what's the responsibility. Like, it does not seem to me that the authority for policing and the responsibility for policing policy and overall safety is clearly articulated in one place. It's split up. The police board seems to have, in theory, some responsibility. It doesn't seem to have a lot of authority. The police chief seems to be sitting there with an unclear sense of what authority and responsibility is. And the legislation has created a lot of confusion. I don't think it was ever intended by the province, at least I would hope not, that we would be the one city in Canada that can't develop a comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy that involves police, because only the police chief or the police board can do that. Or that we can't develop policy options working with the police chief to develop a police safety strategy that's inclusive of that. Because we have an example of it today. Transit police have to be part of this, but they would be only one part of this. And so, you know, if a mayor and council want to develop a comprehensive safety strategy for our transit system, they have to have some relationship with the police that brings the police into that discussion and brings the police as partners into creating these policies. And I don't think politicians should ever interfere in police operations, but politicians should be the catalyst for bringing the police into a larger policy discussion with transit and other departments, especially when we have the safety problems we have today.
How much would it cost to implement all the changes you're proposing here?
I'm not sure, but we're going to be, I mean, some of them are costed. I think that it's just about $1.9 million to do the upgrades, a lot of them are budgeted for, the radios are already budgeted for. There is money in the budget for parts of the streaming service that's been built in and out of the budget. So one of the things that I've been asking for, Joanne, is I've called Mike Jack several times, and I asked for a financial briefing because I've read a lot of the documents, I had a lot of questions. I was told that we will not get them, that any candidate for mayor is referred to the budget documents online. They have offered a briefing now, recently, that I could go and meet with the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of the city. But I could do that as a one-off, and I said that I would do that. I would also send my questions, because I know the city's budgets pretty well. We manage, there's a lot of things that are not, that I really need to know a little bit more about. As I'll be rolling out our financial plan, our city investment plan for the city budget and the long-term financial plan. But I have to tell you, it's been a bit of a challenge in building it right now. But I'm looking forward to meeting with the CFO, and I'll probably be able to, because I need to get a little bit more detail on, is this money real? Is it projected? Is there revenue for this money, or is this someone put in the budget 2 years out, or like what are the implications of that?
Okay, so still looking for more info to determine that, I guess, then.
Yeah.
And the outreach workers, waking folks, then cleaning shelters, my understanding was transit already does that when they come across shelters being occupied by people sleeping in them.
But this is done routinely, so you can talk to David Pizzato about this. They started the program because this was an issue, as it was in the city. So what happened at the biz, I'm very clear, I'm on the board of the Exchange Biz, because all my businesses are down there, So when this became an issue, David and the biz staff reconfigured the way they do their outreach. So the outreach workers go to the shelters before 8 o'clock in the morning. They check people, are they okay? Are they safe? Do they know where to go? The cleaning crews, the environmental cleanup crews, come in with them. They ask people to leave. It's been very, very successful. They clean the whole shelter up. By that time, people have usually moved on to Solo Mission, where they're going at that point of the day. And it's been extremely successful in keeping the shelters accessible for transit users without any conflict. And I don't think we've had a single issue or incident. And and everyone's been talking about this as if it's some unsolvable problem, that the shelters cannot be maintained and cleaned. And cannot be safe places. Well, the Exchange District has got a system and got a program that's been very successful that could be replicated.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right, and Homelessness Winnipeg and Main Street Project, I think I've asked about this, and they did have concerns about people not wanting to leave, and so that does happen. So you're saying?
Well, they have their security person, the security person go out with the cleanup person, and it's been, when you start by they don't go in there and rough people up. They go in there first to check to make sure everyone's okay. If they have to get help for anyone, then they ask people to leave. And so far, I've talked to David this morning about it again, just to double check that nothing happened recently, but he tells me that it's been a very successful program. They're feeling very good about it. And if there was an issue, again, there was violence, then you bring in other people. But even if it didn't work 100% of the time, which it seems pretty close to what it's working right now, if that's happening frequently enough, those small number of times that you actually have someone who's manic or violent or something, then you can deal with that. All of these biz patrol people all have their radios and stuff, and they have good relations with the police, so they can realize that. The police can use these eyes on the street to get much more efficient use out of our police officers who don't have to be out there checking everyone in the morning at every bus shelter. But it would be nice to have a couple of police officers who went on the occasions, the rarer occasions, fortunately, that there might be an incident or a problem, that the security forces from the biz or the street ambassadors can have a prearranged contact arrangement to get police officers out.
Just a technical question. Rapidly replacing the radio communication systems, that's already part of the transit master plan funding that got approved, isn't it? I thought that was part of that.
Yeah, it is, but, and again, we have the funding. Like the mayor and said that the funding's there, but they're still saying 2024. Okay. Like that's 2 years from now. And that's something that, pick up a shovel. Start working on it. Start putting up a tower or something, and maybe start implementing it now, not waiting until 2024 before we get something up and running. Like as I say, okay. I'm getting reports of operators not having any radio contact while they're being attacked at Unicity or St. Norbert. right? And that's gotta stop now. You can't wait until 2024 when more of the resistors of this radio system that's 40 years old starts burning out, right? There's no more Radio Shack to get these parts from. You know what, we have to start upgrading it now.
It's
How
also, it's
much
also,
sooner would you plan to do it? Just to-
I would like to look at trying to get it done in the next 12 to 18 months if that's possible.
Okay.
And putting the weight of the mayor's office. But I mean, it's these, when I looked at the onboard video and streaming and Wi-Fi discussion, that goes back to 2008. I mean, this has been almost 15 years that we've been looking at electronic and video surveillance, and all we have on 50 buses. And a lot of the reasons when people approach me, Mayor, that we actually got stuff done quickly. We set timelines, we set objectives, we did 4-year budgets. Every year of the 4-year budget had the outcome. We have 4-year budgets now, as some folks will say, but try to go through them and actually figure out where the termination dates are. There's so much kicking the can down the road that we're losing confidence. You know, there's no excuse why we don't have an onboard police solution. There's no excuse why at the same time our radios aren't working. There's no excuse where on top of that, the shields aren't there. And on top of that, we don't have a police or a security response. I mean, these are not new issues. They've been around for over a decade. They've been probably around for over 10 years, and we're not responding to them. You know, because in the last decade, our buses have become more dangerous, and that's not the fault of City Council. But I mean, if you could point to one serious thing that had been done to improve security on buses while there's been front page news that this has been a problem, I think we'd all take a deep breath and say, yeah, okay. But we're just not making the progress that we need to make, and there's a fairly consistent pattern of not getting it done anywhere near on time or in a reasonable time frame, and we need to change that.
Sorry, so you just criticize them for still not having a onboard police
No,
presence.
no, but not solving
You're
that.
not adding that either.
No, but I'm saying not solving that problem of on-bus security. Do you know what I mean? It's not like we've seen 3 or 4 different proposals that were rejected, right? There just hasn't been a proposal coming out of the city council process at all.
They proposed cadets and then they did reject it eventually.
Yes.
So they did.
So I guess my point is,
Yeah.
right now, you can't put a check, we completed that. We don't have shelters, we don't have buses,
Right.
we don't have response. People can't call 911 to get suspended. We don't actually have a solution to anyone on the bus. We haven't done any of these things.
Mhm.
And we've had over a decade. And some of those people have been sitting around that council chamber for a while with the opportunity to do these things. What I'm saying is, these things would be done in my first term in office with the council. And I would meet with councillors every month as I did. Ask for their priorities. I would meet with union presidents, every month as I used to. I used to meet with the union presidents and management team. We would assign people, and people would report into the mayor and council. This is a priority, we have to have this done, here's the time frame, the resources. And we made difficult budget decisions sometimes. Sometimes we had to kick out lower priority things. Sometimes the dog park had to wait for the transit safety system. So those are the kinds of decisions that we need made, and we need focused priorities, and we need a plan. And I think these 10 points get us far down the road. But I didn't just whip these up. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to people in the community, safety people. God knows we've had, ATU and I've had enough meetings. James just took me to meet a whole bunch of transit operators, again, heard things that confirmed what we're doing. So, we know these things are supported. We know they make sense to transit operators. We know they'll make sense to the public. And we know that they're things that are not outrageously expensive that can be done quickly.
Monsieur Murray, une question en français.
Oui, s'il vous plaît.
D'abord sur cette question de